Hello everyone. In this video, we are going to discuss about the normalization topic. This is part 2. So in this video, we are going to learn about the second normal form and third normal form. Okay, now let's see what is second normal form. So the definition for that is that in the second normal form, a relation must be in one NF. Okay, so it should be in first normal form. So in the second normal form, all non-key attributes are fully functional dependent on the primary key. So there should be no partial dependency. Okay, so actually a table, it should be in first normal form and there should not be any partial dependency. So this is the definition for second normal form. Now let's see what is dependency. So consider an example. Okay, in this table we have a relation is nothing but it is a table. So we have student table. So student table we have student ID, name, branch and address. Okay, so here in among these columns we have a chosen primary key as a student ID. So primary key is nothing but it is a unique one. So it uniquely identifies the each record in a table. Okay, so here in this table student ID is a primary key. So, for example, if I want to get the branch name of a particular student, so with student ID, I can easily get the branch name. Likewise, if you want to get the name of a particular student, so with student ID, I can easily get the name. Likewise, so each record, so uniquely, it is identified by the primary key. Okay. So that is so all the remaining columns are depending upon this primary key. Hence, it is called as functional dependency. Okay, so this is called dependency. Now let's see what is partial dependency. So in the previous case, we have seen only a single table. Okay, so for example, suppose if we have multiple tables or a larger one. Okay, so here we have one more table called subject table. So in that we have two columns. We have subject ID and subject. Okay, so likewise we have marks table. In that we have mark ID, student ID, subject ID, marks, then faculty. Now let's see what is partial dependency. And here, if you can see, so these two columns, it is highlighted here. So let me tell you. So why we have taken these two column as a primary key. Okay, here student ID as well as subject ID together is taken as a primary key. That is a candidate key. It is a minimal key. Okay, so for an example, if you want to get the marks, okay, get the mark of a student, so it is not possible for me to get the marks only with the student ID. Okay, only with this primary key I cannot get the marks of a student. I need to know the subject ID also. Okay, likewise, if with subject ID, it's by having subject ID alone, I cannot get the name of the student or marks. So together, student ID and subject ID, I can easily identify all the record in the table. Okay, so here in this table, this student ID and subject ID together, it is acting as a primary key. It is also called as a candidate key. It is a minimal key. Okay, so and now let's see what is partial dependency. So these two columns actually these two columns are candidate key. Okay, these two columns are called as prime attribute. Okay, so the all the remaining columns are called as non-prime attributes. So for an example, in this table we have one more column called faculty. It is a non-prime attribute, right? Non-prime column. So this faculty column is depend upon the subject ID. Okay, it depends upon this particular column, subject column. Okay, but it is not at all depending upon the student ID. Only faculty column is depending upon the subject ID, because this DBMS faculty, so this faculty is depending upon this subject ID. That is the subject faculty is depending upon this particular subject. Okay, so there is no need to depend upon the student ID. Okay, so here only this faculty is depending upon this subject ID alone. So non-prime attribute is partially depending upon the prime attribute. Or actually these two are prime attribute. So this faculty non-prime attribute is partially depending upon the subject ID. Okay, so this is called as partial dependency. So in the second normal form, we need to eliminate this partial dependency. It should not be there in the second normal form. So this is the partial dependency. Okay, now let's see how to remove partial dependency. So as I said, partial dependencies occur when an attribute in a table is dependent on only a portion of the primary key rather than the entire key. So this is the entire key, right? Together, like student ID and subject ID will act as a entire key, but this faculty column is depend partially on this particular column alone. That is called as partial dependency. Now, how to remove that? The easy solution is that to shift the faculty column from the marks table to the subject table. So easily we can remove that particular faculty column, and we are we are adding to the subject table. Okay. Now as a result, the subject table will change to subject ID, subject, and particular faculty. Okay. So now our final table. So our final table, the solution we have mark ID, student ID, subject ID, then marks. Okay, so in the subject ID, we, yeah, that faculty is shifted to the subject table. Okay, now this particular table, it is in the second normal form with no partial dependency. So here there is no partial dependency. So this is the solution. Okay, so the second normal form is that a particular table, it should be in first normal form, which means it should satisfy all the rules are there in the first normal form. Okay, then the second one is that there should be no partial dependency. If a table has any partial dependency, so it has to be identified, and the table needs to be splitted accordingly to get rid of the partial dependency. So that is the second normal form. Okay, now let's discuss about what is third normal form. So third normal form definition for 3NF is that a relation is in 3NF only if it is in 2NF. Okay, so a table, it's said to be a third normal form if and only if it should be in second normal form, and there should not be any transitive dependency, no transitive dependency in third normal form. Okay, so consider an example here in 3NF. We are taking this again student table. In student table we have student ID, name, branch, and address. Then subject table we have subject ID, subject, then faculty. Then marks table we have mark ID, student ID, subject ID, marks, and we are going to add two more columns with the marks table. Okay, one is what is that? Exam name and total. See the same the previous table only we have taken what we have used in the second normal form. Okay, so as we have discussed earlier, like this student ID and subject ID together will act as a primary key, that is candidate key. Okay, so in this table we have added two more columns. One is that exam name and total. Okay, what is transitive dependency? So transitive dependency is nothing but, so a non-prime attribute depends upon the other non-prime attributes rather than depending upon the prime attribute. That is transitive dependency. Let me clearly explain you that. So in this table, what is prime attribute here? This student ID, subject ID together act as a prime attribute. All the other remaining attributes are non-prime attributes. Mark ID, marks, exam name, and total. Okay, so these columns are called as non-prime attributes. In this table, we have added these two columns, exam name and total. So, okay, let's take this exam name column alone. This exam name, it is depending upon this prime attribute. Okay, exam name depends upon that particular subject, right? So, it is depending upon the subject. Whereas, if you take this column, total column, it is depending upon the exam name. So, on what exam the marks will be obtained. So, basically, like that, a total column is depending upon this exam name rather than depending upon the prime attributes. Okay, this is called as transitive dependency. This needs to be avoided, this needs to be eliminated. Okay, so yeah, as I said, um, column exam name depends upon the prime attribute student ID and subject ID. So column total, it depends on the non-prime attribute exam name. So when non-prime attribute depends on other non-prime attribute rather than depending on prime attributes or primary key, that is called as transfer dependency. Now let's see how to remove this transfer dependency. So just simply remove exam name and total and make it as a new table with exam ID. That's all. That's the exam table now. Okay, in the exam table we have exam ID, exam name and total. And our final table will become like this with mark ID, student ID, subject ID, then exam ID, then total. Now, if you check this table, it is in 3NF. There is no transitive dependency. Okay, so yeah, so we have completed 3NF and 2NF. So basically in 2NF, two conditions are there. One is that second normal form, it should be in first normal form and there should not be any partial dependency. Likewise in 3NF, a relation should be in 2NF and also there should not be any transitive dependency. And now let's see the advantages of this normalization. So the advantages is like data redundancy is minimized. So as I said, in normalization, it is a technique to minimize the repetition of data, that is data redundancy. But we cannot completely eliminate the or completely avoid data redundancy. Okay, we can minimize the data redundancy by using normalization. And the database data, it must be consistent. The third one is that database that is far more adaptable. Database security has been improved. Yeah. So with that we have completed our second normal form and third normal form. Hope you all have enjoyed learning the normalization topic. And for the previous part 1 normalization video, you can find the link in the description box. Yeah, once again, thank you. Thanks a lot.